It's December 15th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with a possible ICBM launch by North Korea. A South Korean presidential security advisor says there's a possibility that the North will launch an intercontinental ballistic missile before the end of December. The comment came as he arrived in Washington for the second meeting of the South Korea-US Nuclear Consultative Group. Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant warns the war against Hamas in Gaza could last months, showing confidence in a victory. In the meantime, serious discussions to revive a ceasefire are underway. Russian President Vladimir Putin vows that his country will push on with the Ukraine war. He says Russian goals are unchanged. There's a possibility that North Korea will go for an intercontinental ballistic missile launch sometime this month. A senior South Korea's presidential office says to better respond to such threats, Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo will start sharing real-time data on the North's missiles by the end of the year. Our Peunji leads us this morning.
A senior presidential official has said there is a possibility that North Korea could launch an intercontinental ballistic missile this month. The first deputy chief of the National Security Office, Kim Tae-yo, said this as he arrived in Washington, D.C. for a high-profile meeting. He did not elaborate on what intelligence led him to believe so, or if related information has been shared with the U.S., but added that a ballistic missile launch using ICBM technology is a subject of extended deterrence discussions between Seoul and Washington. He also noted that regardless of the range of the ballistic missile, if a nuclear weapon is loaded onto it, it is a nuclear threat and an attack against South Korea. Kim is scheduled to take part in the second meeting of the Nuclear Consultative Group, a security meeting designed to discuss nuclear and strategic planning issues between Seoul and Washington. In the meantime, South Korea, the U.S., and Japan plan to start sharing data on North Korean missiles in real time. The Pentagon spokesperson said in a briefing on Thursday local time that the three countries are working together to operationalize the system by the end of 2023.
That we are hard at work on delivering on those agreements. We are on schedule to deliver by the end of this year.
His remarks come a day after the White House National Security Council Senior Director for East Asia and Oceania, Mira Rapp-Hooper, said the data sharing system is expected to become operational within the next few days. Earlier in August, the leaders of the three countries agreed to step up efforts to counter evolving North Korean nuclear missile threats. Peunji, Arirang News.
U.S. lawmakers have passed the final defense policy bill for next year, which includes keeping American troops in South Korea at the current level. The House and Senate on Wednesday passed the fiscal year 2024 National Defense Authorization Act, approving $886 billion of defense spending. That's up 3% on year. The act includes maintaining the current number of 28,500 U.S. armed forces in South Korea, strengthening the U.S. commitment to providing extended deterrence to Seoul, and requiring the Pentagon to report on the latest progress in transferring wartime operational control from the U.S. to South Korea. Now, the bill will go to President Joe Biden for his final signature. South Korea scrambled fighter jets after Chinese and Russian military planes entered its Korea Air Defense Identification Zone over waters off the country's east coast. The country's military said 2 Chinese and 4 Russian planes briefly entered the KADIZ for 70 minutes at about noon on Thursday, but it added they did not violate their country's airspace. The military said it detected the aircraft before their entry and mobilized the Air Force's fighter jets to cover any eventualities. Chinese and Russian planes had also flown into the KADIZ earlier in June. Now, KADIZ is not territorial airspace, but it is an area where foreign planes are required to identify themselves to prevent clashes. Now, over in Gaza, Israel says it will take several more months for Hamas to be defeated. The comments come despite reports that serious talks are underway for another ceasefire in the war-torn area. Lee Seung-ja has more.
During U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan's visit to Tel Aviv, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant told the White House official that the war could last more than several months for Hamas to be defeated. Gallant told Sullivan that the Palestinian militant group had built infrastructure under the ground and above the ground, making it difficult to destroy them all. During Sullivan's visit, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stressed that his country will continue to fight until absolute victory against Hamas is achieved. Meanwhile, a senior official from Hamas said Thursday that serious talks are underway to revive the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. According to Germany's DPA news agency, the Hamas said Qatari and Egyptian officials are negotiating with Israel and the United States on behalf of the militant group. He added that there will be no exchange of Israeli hostages or Palestinian prisoners until the ceasefire goes into effect. With around 327,000 cases of infectious diseases being detected in Gaza, a spokesperson for the Palestinian Ministry of Health warns that Gaza faces the spread of epidemics, infectious diseases, malnutrition, and the lack of clean drinking water and personal hygiene. The chief spokesperson for UNICEF also warned that the perfect storm for disease has begun in the region, with 21 of the Gaza Strip's 36 hospitals closed. Gaza's health officials warned that diseases are spreading even faster, with many displaced in overcrowded shelters. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says there will only be peace if Russia's goals in Ukraine are achieved. Appearing on television for his year-end press conference on Thursday, Putin demanded Ukraine's unconditional surrender while calling for the denazification of Ukraine as well as demilitarization. The Russian president gave a positive assessment of the war, saying that Russia has strengthened its defensive positions along the front lines. He also claimed that Western support for Ukraine would soon dry up. Now, despite his optimistic view of the war, Putin gave no time frame on when the war would end. President Yoon and First Lady Kim have returned home this morning from a state visit to the Netherlands. During the three-day Amsterdam visit, South Korea and the Netherlands forged a semiconductor alliance and vowed to upgrade their cooperation in a variety of fields, including defense and future technology. On their last day in the Dutch capital, President Yoon attended a Korean culture performance with Dutch King Willem-Alexander and Queen Maxima on Wednesday evening, which the presidential office said was a gesture of gratitude for the king's invitation for the state visit, the first to be made by a South Korean leader to the Netherlands. It's now official that South Korea and the Netherlands have forged an alliance to play leading roles in the global chip race. But why do they find each other so attractive or appealing to one another? Let's wrap up President Yoon Suk-yeol's state visit to the Netherlands with Professor Lee Hyun. Welcome back, Professor Lee.
Thanks for having me back.
Professor Lee, chip cooperation with countries like the U.S. and Japan has been actively ongoing for South Korea, but why is chip cooperation or the new chip alliance with the Netherlands so important at this moment?
This has to do because of the sensitivity of the chip market and particularly the supply chain for semiconductors. As you know, the semiconductor market requires a lot of sort of intricate parts as well as distribution, the installation of those parts into various products that we use on a daily basis. And so because these supply chains are so sensitive to various worldwide events, we saw that recently with the pandemic, which basically delayed production in many different parts of the world, which then resulted in delays in sort of final end products like cars and phones and computers. And so because the Netherlands produces, and particularly companies in the Netherlands produce particular machines that are very important to the production of these semiconductors, having a chip alliance between South Korean companies like Samsung and SK Hynix is really critical for Korea to establish itself in terms of protecting the supply chain so that Korean chip makers can depend on a steady supply of equipment in order to produce those chips, which are necessary for the products that we use on a daily basis.
Definitely, and it's apparently the first time that the Netherlands has stated such a term called semiconductor alliance with a foreign country. Now, why do you think Amsterdam has chosen Seoul over other cities or countries?
Well, particularly as we know, in terms of the chip market, one of the biggest players is in Taiwan, TSMC. For a while, a lot of companies in the Netherlands supplied Taiwan, but also China as well, because China has also wanted to increase its production of semiconductors. But as we know, because of the recent tensions between the United States and China, and specifically the United States is targeting, particularly Chinese companies with respect to various kinds of national security issues. The Netherlands, of course, has seen a significant reduction in its ability to be able to trade with China, but also with Taiwan. There's a concern because a lot of production of Taiwanese chips is made in China. And there's that relationship between China and Taiwan that I guess concerns the Netherlands. And so the Netherlands needs to find, and its producers need to find another partner to ensure that its materials and its production of these sensitive equipment will be steady and comfortable. So Korea, of course, makes a lot of sense for the Netherlands because of Samsung, as I mentioned, and SK Hynix. And because Samsung wants to be, and SK Hynix wants to be a major player beyond TSMC to dominate the market, Netherlands, of course, sees this as an opportunity for its producers to be able to take advantage of the current situation between the United States and China.
That does make a very good point. Why Seoul is the most appealing out of all the nations. Now, let's delve deeper into President Yoon's trip to the Netherlands. He was the first foreign leader to have checked out the ASML's heavily controlled, the so-called clean room there. Now, that says a lot about how seriously the Dutch firm is taking Korea as its partner, right?
Absolutely. I mean, ASML is the leading producer of sort of a specific machine called photolithography. And this particular sort of technology allows semiconductor producers to produce next generation chips. And so because these machines are such high demand, and because these machines are highly complex, and so, for example, ASML can only produce 50 machines, these machines per year, which leads to very fierce competition between, of course, Samsung and TSMC and other companies who want to access these machines to produce these next generation chips. So for the president to be able to visit the clean room of ASML really is a symbolic gesture for ASML to indicate that it really wants to upgrade the relationship between ASML and South Korean companies and Netherlands and South Korea as a whole. And so I think this is a win-win situation for both companies, so that basically you can have a steady supply of machines, and Samsung and SK Hynix can make sure that they will ensure a certain level of production of these machines for their desire to produce next generation chips. So I think it's very symbolic, and it's indication of this growing relationship, I think, which, as we mentioned, is strategic.
Definitely. Now, all eyes are on how much and how quickly South Korean firms will be able to get EUV, that's extreme ultraviolet lithography technology from ASML. But as we all know, other global chip firms are partners of ASML. Will obtaining EUV help South Korea actually lead the global chip race? What's your take on this?
Right. I mean, the big Samsung, some years ago announced that it really wanted to dominate and be the #1 leader in terms of producing these next generation chips. And so TSMC is currently the market leader. And I think Samsung sees an opportunity to maybe overtake TSMC in this field, specifically because there are external factors that are, I think, contributing to potentially this opportunity for South Korean companies. And I mentioned before, the United States, of course, has been really keen on competition with China. And the reason why this affects TSMC is because the United States has legislation called the CHIPS Act, which basically restricts a lot of companies from doing business with Chinese companies. And this potentially affects TSMC because, again, as I mentioned, TSMC has a lot of production in China itself. And so because the United States is very keen on making sure that China is in check with respect to producing sensitive chips that have influences on national security, Samsung can jump in, of course, with its own production, not reliant on China per se, and then take advantage of this so that its production is not related necessarily to specifically the Chinese market and also Chinese production, but then the Netherlands understands this and can then take advantage of the situation such that now Samsung can get exclusive access to these machines, then that can propel it to become sort of the market leader in this technology.
All right, Professor Ian, thank you so much as always for your insight. You have a great day.
You too.
South Korea's auto exports for the first 11 months of this year saw an all-time high for this period. And hopes are high they will break the $70 billion mark for the first time at the end of the year. An Sung-jin reports.
South Korea's automobile exports this year have hit a record high for the January to November period. According to Trade Ministry, amid greater demand for eco-friendly cars, the value of exports reached $64.5 billion. In November alone, the value of exports saw the highest monthly figure ever, reaching $6.53 billion, which is some $30 million more than the previous record set in March. This record has been attributed to an increase in exports of high-value eco-friendly cars such as the EV9 to the North American market. Exports to that region saw an on-year increase of 51%, making it the biggest market for Korean vehicles, followed by the EU. For those vehicles that were affected by the Inflation Reduction Act, such as EVs, hydrogen vehicles, and plug-in hybrid cars, despite concerns, the number of vehicles exported was the highest ever for November. Some 134,000 Korean electric vehicles were exported to the U.S. in the year up to November, nearly twice last year's figure. As the number of vehicles produced from January to November was 3.88 million, it is nearly certain that this year will be the first time since 2018 that the number of vehicles produced in Korea exceeds 4 million. Han Sung-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea is to boost its technological competitiveness in industrial robotics by investing $2.3 billion by 2030 to further develop technology, infrastructure, and human capital. The Trade Ministry announced key strategies on Thursday that will bring about an autonomous economy, starting with investment from both the private and public sectors. It will also look to supply 1 million robots to various industries, including the manufacturing, logistics, and welfare sectors, to enhance production and reduce accidents. The government plans to establish regulations that can support the emerging robotics industry. Diversifying the country's supply chain has long been a challenge for South Korea, especially over concerns of another urea shortage crisis. What efforts are being done to overcome the hurdle? Our economics correspondent Lee Soo-jin has this report.
Fears over a potential repeat of the urea shortage crisis in 2021 after China's recent urea export delays have exposed the need for South Korea to diversify its supply chains. Although only around 22% of urea fertilizers came from China this year, China accounted for a whopping 91% of urea for vehicles and industrial use. But the circumstances behind the export halts are different. In 2021, Beijing halted urea exports amid a trade row with Australia, but this time it's from China experiencing a surge in domestic prices due to increased demand from nations like India, meaning the export controls may not be long-lasting. We visited a gas station to see what the situation was like.
I'm here at a large gas station chain that's frequented by many truck drivers and is located near Incheon Port. Let's go find out if its supply of urea solution is meeting the demand.
An employee confirmed that there's enough pumped DEF and they haven't witnessed the long queues from 2 years ago. But he said the demand for the DEF in containers is higher than usual.
The DEF in containers does get sold out almost as soon as it comes in. It's actually sold out today, but we're not experiencing any dramatic delays in orders.
While the situation appears to be not as serious as it was in 2021, China is restricting exports of other key raw materials like ammonium phosphate, 95% of which comes from China. As such, Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho and related ministers earlier this week announced that the government will be extending the tariff rate quota on urea and ammonium phosphate to the end of 2024. The industry ministry also announced on Wednesday that it plans to reduce South Korea's reliance on specific nations for key items by 2030. This will be done through achieving self-sufficiency, diversifying import sources, and stockpiling raw material inventories. One expert says that policies based on providing financial incentives will likely prove to be the most effective.
To increase domestic production and diversify import sources, the government needs to provide tax cuts, subsidies, and reduce shipping costs to compete with China's competitive prices.
While it may take time for these policies to prove effective, they will hopefully be a step forward in preventing another shortage crisis from happening. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Kim Si-young, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. The European Union on Thursday decided to open accession negotiations with Ukraine and Moldova and to grant candidate status to Georgia. Ukraine's aspiration to join the European Union had been long opposed by the Hungarian Prime Minister Orban, who had previously vetoed the move. However, at Thursday's summit in Brussels, Orban left the room in a pre-agreed and constructive manner as the voting began, leaving the 26 other leaders to vote unanimously for the motion. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said this decision was a victory for Ukraine, a victory for all Europe, and that history is made by those who don't get tired of fighting for freedom. Moldovan President Maia Sandu also welcomed the decision. Thursday's decision, however, does not guarantee EU membership status for either of the countries. The negotiation process may take years to finalize the decision. Now, moving on to the next story, the World Health Organization on Thursday urged governments to ban all flavored e-cigarettes. The UN Health Agency said on Thursday that urgent measures are required to control electronic cigarettes, as researchers suggest there is little evidence vaping can reduce smoking or is a healthier alternative. The WHO cited studies to state that e-cigarettes can drive nicotine addiction among non-smokers, especially children and young adults. The WHO Director General said kids are being recruited and trapped at an early age to use e-cigarettes and may get hooked to nicotine. In sports news, the English Premier League has announced its first female referee. The Professional Game Match Officials Limited confirmed on Thursday that Rebecca Welch will officiate Fulham's game against Burnley on December 23rd. 40-year-old Welch has over 10 years of experience as a football referee and in January became the first female to referee a men's championship game. Sam Allison will become the first black top-flight referee in 15 years when he oversees Sheffield United versus Luton Town on December 26th. In July, the Football Association announced plans to recruit 50% more referees from historically underrepresented backgrounds by 2026. Currently, only 3% of referees in professional football are of black or Asian ethnicity. Now, some lighter news from the US to end the week. A loose ball in New Jersey found its way to Newark Penn Station on Thursday morning, causing about an hour's delay for trains traveling to New York. The bull was first seen standing on the train tracks at the New Jersey station at around 11 a.m. local time. Local police cornered the bull about 5 kilometers away from the station and safely captured it. Newark City's public safety director said that the bull will be sent to a local animal sanctuary.
Good morning. It rained all night and will rain through most of the day, but mountainous regions of Gangwon-do province will continue to see snow instead. About the rain first, southern provinces will see 10 to 60 millimeters of showers. The capital area could see 5 to 20 millimeters of more rainfall today. Mountainous regions in Gangwon-do could see more than 30 centimeters of snowfall with heavy snow alerts being issued there, so please stay safe. It's a rainy but balmy start to the day, and afternoon highs will go up similar to slightly lower than yesterday. Daegu topping out at 13, Gwangju at 14, and Busan at 19 degrees this afternoon. Still quite warmer than seasonal norms in southern provinces. Then rain will take a break tonight before making its return tomorrow morning with a big freeze. Highs on Saturday will be -3 degrees, and Sunday's lows will plunge to -11 degrees. So if you plan to be outside tomorrow, make sure to dress in extra layers. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back next week for Monday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time. Enjoy your weekend.